Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be looking at Chapter 8, which is all about strategic analysis and why it's important for firms to perform strategic analysis on their companies. And when we talk about strategic analysis, we're really just talking about how companies or organizations really understand the aspects of their competitive environment. And so I'm going to go through some things of the textbook with you while I talk about a few things just to kind of help you navigate. And so we're going to talk about a couple different things. We're going to be talking about SWOT analyses, which if you've taken other business classes before, you may or may not have heard of. And we're also going to be talking about the PESTLE approach to doing analyses as well. So I'm going to start with the SWOT. It's an acronym, and it stands for Strengths, Weaknesses, Opportunities, and Threats. And it is probably the one that you will hear about the most, if you will. When we talk about strengths and weaknesses, that is focusing more on the internal part of the company, things that they can control. If we talk about opportunities and threats, those focus more on the external environments of an organization, things that are more out of their control, if you will. In this part of your textbook, it talks about the competitive environment. So that's just in general talking about the components inside, internal and external from the firm, if you will. So internal being things that are more controllable, so like characteristics of the firm itself, okay? External being more like global environment and anything that may impact the firm's success externally, if you will. It could be the rise in interest rates, just, natural disasters, anything like that, things that are more out of control, that are more external factors, if you will, when it comes to your competitive environment. And so we're digging into the SWOT just a little bit. Strengths, we're going to be doing a SWOT analysis in class too, so it's great to get a feel of how companies do this. And SWOT analyses can really be great for a company, but they're about as good as the person doing it, all right? So you really want the person to know what they're doing, to really dig in when it comes to a SWOT, because they can be really great and they can not always be super great, just depending. And so I'm going to scroll down just a little bit. Let me hit whoops, jumped to the wrong chapter. So when we talk about SWOTs here, it gives you the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So your strengths could be you have great employees, you have a great brand recognition, you have, once again, unique capabilities, things like that. Weaknesses, and these, once again, are all internal things that you can control, and outdated technology. Once again, employees can be a weakness as well, and your book kind of gives you some examples there. And skill gaps, if you work in a organization that has a high operating cost or anything like that. So those are inside the firm. Outside the firm, once again, opportunities, threats, underserved markets, new social trends, any type of technological advances, those are all great opportunities. And then threats, economic downturns, which we probably all have lived through at this point, at some given point in time. Government regulations, competitor actions. This would also be anything environmental. Like I just mentioned before, it could be that, a hurricane came through, tornado more recently in Little Rock, and things like that that have affected your organization that is out of your control. So that is just the SWOT analysis in general, all right? So then your book talks about the firm's more external macro environment, and it's called PESTLE, all right? And this is an acronym that stands for political, economic, sociocultural, technological, environmental, and legal factors. So when you hear PESTLE, that is what that is referring to. And if you look here in your textbook, it gives you a good diagram, if you will, to give you a visual of what that may look like. So a firm's environment contains different elements, once again, that can impact the firm. All right. So it talks about macro environments, if you will, and these factors really are, regardless of the industry and the type they are, but it's just kind of out of their control. When we talk about the political aspect of PESTLE, we're really just talking about a lot of things: tariffs, trades agreements, stuff like that. Okay, and scroll just a little bit to give you this visual, if you will. Economic factors, all right, so your employment levels, can you not, I think one thing that we've been going through in our just economic environment lately is that people are having a hard time keeping employees, and this has been a since COVID thing. Interest rates, our interest rates are skyrocketed right now. Exchange rates, all right, your socio-cultural factors, your demographic trends, consumer preferences, market diversity, your technological factors, your internet, your smartphones, connectivity, etc., your resource scarcity, recycling, alternative energy sources. So think solar and things like that you've heard about, and then your legal factors, so your contract laws, things like that. So that all kind of factors into the PESTLE analysis, if you will. Okay. When your book mentions the internal environment, all right, and so there's some things to keep in mind when we talk about the internal environment. You have your resources, so things a firm has to really work with, your capabilities, what can you actually do, okay? And it mentions the value chain, and a lot of this that I've gone through you will visit to some extent on your quiz, and value chain is definitely one of them as well. So the progression of activities that it really undertakes to create that product, okay? And so it gives you a good diagram in your book here, in your text, when it talks about value creation. So you've got your support activities and your primary activities, all right? And that, I won't read each one to you, but it all leads to the profit of the firm. And so I think that's a really good visual there, if you will. It talks about competition, right? So you've got your competition, which is really a key part, especially in our capitalistic society. It's a key part of any marketplace, all right? So the strategy is important, the process of planning, implementing. So that's kind of what this chapter leads to. We've got SWOT, we've got the PESTLE, and so it talks about some just generic business level competitive strategies, if you will. All right. So the outline basic methods. All right. It talks about your cost leadership strategies. So, customers, it's really when a firm can really offer customers a product or service that is lower than what rivals can. So, what are some organizations that you think about when you hear about cost leadership? I think your book even mentions Aldi, which is a no-frills grocery store. We have a Trader Joe's in Little Rock, and we actually have an Aldi coming. But, no frills typically sell generic or their form of products, or their, kind of like a Kroger brand, but or something like that. But think about Walmart typically has a cost leadership strategy. That's their one of their slogans, always the low price, always. So think in that terms, if you will. Differentiation strategy, all right? Not necessarily always the lowest cost, but how can you differ from other firms? What are you doing different? Okay, so that is really focusing on that type of strategy. All right, and the third one that we talk about in this Porter's forces, if you will, is focus. All right, so it's a little different from the other two. It's it's really that you need to choose one of the other strategies to organize your activities. So you'll strive to lower costs and add value, but the firm really needs to choose to implement a focused strategy, okay? And a lot of times this will help, especially firms with niche markets. All right. And then your book talks about strategic groups. All right. So it's really important that a manager knows other firms in your strategic group. All right. So businesses that follow similar strategies in the same industry. All right. So, I mean, think about your rivals. Right. And so that's kind of, and here's a good example here, or visual, if you will, of a different types of strategic groups. And then the last thing I'm going to hit on for chapter 8 is it talks about strategic positioning. All right. Strategic positioning is really how a firm's decisions serve customers and compete against its rivals. So how you position that, if you will. A firm's strategic position really should try to be unique in some way that competitors cannot imitate quickly or easily. Because, when a firm comes out with a product or service or does something in a specific way, and if it takes on, then other companies or organizations are immediately trying to figure out how they can mimic that, all right? So then your competition is going to be greater. So you really want to accomplish that in the very beginning, if you will. And so just kind of think about those types of things. One thing I'm going to mention is to help you kind of bring it all in is your book talks about the VIRO, or I call it the VIRO, but it's the VRIO. And so you will need to know this for your quiz, or you will revisit this on your quiz. So it is an acronym too. It's a tool that's really used to assess resources and your capabilities, okay? So I had talked about resources and capabilities a little further up, but valuable, so the V is valuable. Does the resource or capability generate value, okay? Is it rare, all right? Is it rare among your firms in your industry? Is it difficult to imitate? Because if not, somebody will. For sure. And then, the organization. How are you organized to really capture value? And so those are some things that companies really kind of use as like an analysis or an analytical tool to help them kind of bring it all in. But that's kind of strategic analysis in a quick nutshell. And I just wanted to highlight some things from your chapter. But I encourage everybody to dig in and read a little bit more in depth. And I will be chatting with everybody soon.